Good morning and welcome to the Totally PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Wendy Lawrence, CEO. Good morning.
Thank you, and good morning everyone, and thank you for taking the time to meet with Totally today as we talk you through our interim results. We do have a presentation that we're going to run through, and before I begin I would just like to introduce you to John McMullen, who is sitting on my right, who was one of the founders of Pioneer Healthcare and is now working full-time at Totally as our medical director. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through, but an opportunity for John to contribute to this presentation as well. Excuse me, voice always goes, doesn't it, right at the very beginning. Without further ado, I will talk about the overview and operational highlights. I will then hand over to Lisa. John will also contribute to that, and then there will be time for answering questions at the end. So first of all, responding to an evolving market. We're very, very aware, of course, that performance is lower than anticipated as the NHS continues in crisis. I am sure that all of us can see the pressure that is on the NHS at the moment, both from the number of people that are waiting for treatment in the NHS, the workforce disputes and the pay disputes, but also world economics, politics and everything else that impacts decision making for such large organisations. We continue to work in partnership with the NHS, ensuring that we see the patients that we can through the contracts that we've got and any opportunities where we can assist the NHS to meet the demands that are placed upon it. During the period that we're reporting, we knew that it was a very difficult time for the NHS, and in FY23 we had started to restructure our organisation. We were bringing together these smaller businesses that we'd acquired, that we'd already updated shareholders on, but we were continuing that work. We've brought that together under one management team now, led by Professor Prasad Godbole, who was one of John's colleagues and one of the founders of Pioneer when we acquired. And again, Prasad was a full-time consultant with the NHS who's now working for Totally. We have reduced our overheads dramatically, and we have cut our costs internally in terms of the different tiers, the different layers, and actually looking at corporate back office function and making sure that we cut our cloth accordingly. And this reflects the service demands along delivery efficiencies. So we've protected our margin. So the message to get over to you today is that whilst we cannot manage the external factors that are placed on Totally, we can certainly manage our own internal factors, and we've done that very successfully. What we now have is a slick organisation that is ready. We continue to retain all of our CQC ratings as good, and that's really, really important for us because we need to ensure that patients remain the priority for our organisation, as well as developing new models of care, expanding our customer base with the use of digital technology to enable us for further growth. We do remain very active in M&A. You could say to us, well, how can you do that when you know that the organisation is shrinking? It's really important that we continue to do that, and should we see an opportunity that is out there, we will find a way of doing it. No, that is not me saying we're coming out for a fundraise. We have no fundraise planned at this time, and we do not have a need for cash. We'll go into that a little bit more, but I know that some of my words will lead you into that area. We move on to the next slide. So we continue to make operational progress. I've already talked about the CQC and the fact that all of our ratings remain good. Through the restructure, we have now ensured that staff at all levels are not only enthusiastic about what we're doing, but they are also empowered to ensure that the delivery of services remain good. We're ensuring all patients can access appropriate care. You will have seen in previous updates via RNS that during the period we mobilised the £10 million contract with NHS 111 for national resilience. I'm pleased to be able to update you on the fact that we continue to do that and have just entered into the winter phase of that, which means that we now are working with NHS England on increased demand, and that will bring increased revenues in H2. We have delivered and continue to deliver many successful pilots with multiple ambulance trusts, broadening the type of care and the work that we do with them, which opens up new opportunities for Totally, and we will continue to do that with organisations to look at how we can expand what we do. It isn't limited to ambulance trusts. When we are in a position to release something to the market, we will, but it's important for you to note that that work continues and will bring benefits to us. I'm going to hand over to John shortly, but before I move on, if we go on to the next slide, I want to reassure you that we are ready for when the NHS is ready to move forward, when the government is ready to re-engage around patient care. Sadly, NHS England at this time are forecasting that there will be circa 11 million patients waiting for care by the end of this financial year, which actually reflects on one in five of the population, which is quite a scary figure. So we need to make sure that we're ready for that. We remain registered on all of the framework agreements across the country so that when hospitals do identify funds to do that work, we will continue. We have seen growth in elective care, and of course we are still working every weekend at hospitals to do that, but it hasn't actually gone as quickly as we would have expected because of the financial pressures. But we are ready, opportunities remain. There are lots of opportunities from tenders as well, and we are submitting those and waiting for the decision-making process to actually continue. And one of the questions that's actually come in today is, can we talk about the new NHS provider selector regime that comes in from the 1st of January, pros and cons from Totally. What this means is that commissioners are able to have dialogue with existing and potential new providers for services where they can make decisions without being weighed down in the complete bureaucracy of tendering. And we see that as quite a positive for us because our relationship management and the way that our staff work is very, very good. And again, because we prioritise the quality of care, we think that this will be a good move for Totally. Time will tell. Again, ICBs will all move to different pace. There will be some ICBs that embrace that from January. There will be others that continue the tender process, but overall, we see that as quite a positive. So moving on, I will hand over to John in a second. But, you know, for me, demand is still very much outstripping supply. Our largest customer remains in crisis, trying to manage all aspects of this. And as I've said many, many times before, we see ourselves as that partner who is there to support the NHS when demand outstrips that capacity. Political timetables, world economics are obviously applying pressure to that. I've already mentioned waiting lists, but the overall area that I wish to get across to investors today is that we remain very committed to this. We're working very hard with the commissioners that we are contracted to do so, and we have submitted tenders, and as the system actually unwinds, we're very much ready to take the next steps. Moving on to the next slide, I am going to hand over to John just to talk a little bit about what he and the clinical workforce have been doing in preparation for that.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say that Totally as a company remain fully invested in offering high quality care. We are also very focused on the need to maintain and improve patient access to care. So we are working in sort of three strategic directions. We are working on the services that we currently provide to improve performance and work on individual patient pathways to make those more efficient and more effective. We are working on new ways of working, looking at where we can deliver services that will reduce costs to the NHS, reducing inpatient stays, reducing access to emergency services, and we are positioning ourselves ready to work with the new systems that will come online, the greater use of computer-aided diagnosis, the greater use of computers managing pathways. And as a company that covers both urgent and elective care, we are very well positioned to be that enabler of the new technology. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Now going to hand over to Lisa. There's a couple of slides on the financial metrics.
Super. Thanks, Wendy. Morning, everybody. So the message, the financial message is a simple one. I'm sure everybody's keen to know where we're going in the future. We have withdrawn forecasts. The message for the first 6 months is that we have seen the impact of the loss of the contracts that we communicated previously. We've announced these. It was over 30 million of contract losses, so that's come through in this period. So we are down 15 million. That at our current margins for urgent care, that has dropped straight down to the bottom line. So 2.2 million of our profit has gone with that contract. And in addition, we have incurred 500,000 of costs in the period in order to restructure. What I draw your attention to is our margin. That has marginally improved. There's a bit through mix. That's also through some of the work that we've been doing in terms of our operational structures. And we are setting ourselves up. We've been very, very focused. We took the very difficult decision. We were obviously geared for growth. We were expecting more contracts to come through, and so we had to take the difficult decision to make deeper cuts in the organisation in order to improve our profitability going forward and obviously respond to that our revenue contraction. So having grown in our admin expenses, we've reversed that, and we are looking to, by the time we get to FY25, we will have reduced our overheads by 30%. This is not visible in the first half year of the results. We've seen the cost, most of the savings are now coming through, and we have delivered more than 3 million annualised. Our EBITDA excluding exceptional items, 1.1 million. As I say, most of that is driven by the loss of contracts. We have continued to win business during the period. We've won over 14 million of new business, and there is plenty in the pipeline. However, that level of uncertainty is what's caused us to withdraw our forecast. And as Wendy has mentioned already, there is an inertia around some decision making. The tenders are still there, the opportunities are still there, but the time taken to make the decisions we have seen slow down. I move on to cash. The cash is stable. That's the message. We have seen a decline in cash as for various reasons we've spoken about before, be that the change in mix, the working capital model of the elective business. That is now stable, and it was actually as we entered the new financial year, we have normalised working capital for electives now, and we've got the reversal of the negative working capital we had for the urgent care contracts that we lost. That has also worked through. So what I'm demonstrating here on this graph, particularly the bottom one, which is showing you that is, and I've always spoken about this, our swings in cash go up and down during the month because we get some hefty payments in one go. We always ensure we've got the cash to cover our payroll. We're very, very focused. We've always managed our cash well, and hopefully with some there's some assurance there. There is the line on that daily cash flow at the bottom. That's over 6 months, and that has remained steady. So the top graph that demonstrates how much taking one point in time, the end of the month, that can fluctuate. And we've mentioned in the announcement there was a debtor of 2.9 million that came in later than we'd expected. The customer is still the NHS ultimately, and the NHS still has the cash. What we have noticed is there have been some delay in payments, but they are not disputing the money. It was just the timing. And part of the reason for having that graph there is that is actually quite normal for us, in that large payments come in and we have our regular payments out. So we manage that well. We've utilised the RCF 50%. We still have 2.5 million of cash available to us. We don't expect to draw down on that. And as a result of now having debt, we've been able to work out our weighted average cost of capital, and our previously very prudent levels of working cost of capital have now been assessed by our auditors, and they are now at an actual level now that we actually have some debt. So previously it was more difficult to calculate the cost of equity. So yes, I think that's all from me. I think the message is that that cash is stable, we are stable, and we are positioned to wait for the next stage of growth.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So the conclusion to all of that is we are very much committed to managing our own internal issues. I believe the presentation today has shown you that we've taken that very seriously. We have controlled our internal issues, but without impacting our margin. You should be reassured that we do not have a problem with cash. Cash is proactively managed, always has been, and that we have no intention of coming out to raise cash. We believe that we will be cash generative in the second half of the year for the reasons that Lisa's already explained in terms of the restructure, the additional winter work that we've got coming through. You can expect to see that. We took the difficult decision around removing forecasts after the board discussed this at length with our Nomad. There are so many external factors that are out of our control, remain out of our control, and being very honest with you, is very difficult to predict when they will unwind. What we can see is that patient demand, patient expectation, the number of people on waiting lists is still there. So we must ensure that we retain the quality of care that we've got, that we maintain that commitment from our staff to ensure that we are ready. As soon as we are enabled to do so, we will respond to the NHS, and we're looking forward to when that time comes. We do know that we're facing an election. Not really worried about that, given that we have seen on many occasions commitment from all parties that they will prioritise patient care and that they will work with the independent sector. So please take away from that the external issues are why we have withdrawn forecasts, not our own internal issues. Last but by no means least, we did release to investors some time ago that our current non-executive directors are deemed to be non-independent now because of the time that they've actually served with Totally, and that being in excess of 9 years. We have reported in our interims that we have now very successfully engaged with Simon Stillwell. Simon is known to many investors, and we've got a summary there of his past. Simon has joined the board as a non-executive director and will step into the role of chairman from the 1st of January, when Bob Holt will move away from that position. Bob is very committed to Totally, and I've already been asked the question many times, is he going to sell his shares? He's a large shareholder. I don't believe that Bob has that intention at this time. He very much wants to see Totaly's success. And if he can help us in the future, I am absolutely sure that he will do. And he will remain as mentor to people inside the organisation. So we're looking forward to working with Simon. We're already having daily conversations with him. And as we get to know him, I am sure that he will engage with investors, including retail, to talk about strategically where he sees Totally going in the future and what he can commit to for the organisation. So thank you for your time. We will update you further as things develop within Totally, and I hope that you will take the presentation today and its positive reinforcement of messages as they are meant to be. Thank you.
Wendy, Lisa, John, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. As you can see, we have received a number of questions throughout today's presentation. Wendy, can I please ask you to read out the questions and give responses where appropriate to do so, and I'll pick up from you at the end.
Yes, of course, thank you. I'll try and answer the questions. Any that we don't get to answer today, we will try and formally answer back through the platform. So I was asked the question about the new NHS provider selection regime. I think I answered that one in the presentation. There are always pros and cons. It isn't an absolute change from the 1st of January. We do expect to still see tenders, but we also expect some ICBs to engage with the new regime as we go forward. We pride ourselves on our relationship with commissioners, so we're hoping that overall this will be a positive impact for Totally. Second question, will other directors follow the lead of the new chairman and buy shares on the market? Where do you see the company valuation in 6 months' time? I don't know where we'll see the company's valuation in 6 months' time. That's obviously in the hands of yourselves as investors and the institutions around us. I'm very pleased that Simon has bought in the open market and was announced this morning. It's an individual decision of the other directors, and obviously we will announce that as we go through, and we're all in individual financial positions as well. What I can tell you is that individual directors have contributed to the cost-cutting exercise that we have gone through recently. It is not something that I wish to put out in the public domain because it is all very personal, but we have all contributed to cost reduction in the organisation as we go forward. And obviously, if any of us do look to buy shares, I mean, joking apart, we're a bit of a bargain at the moment, aren't we? So, you know, it's something that I'm sure individuals are considering. When do you expect the NHS to resume contracts? There are contracts out there, and I'm sorry if I didn't get that across. So we are actively tendering for services now. So when tenders come out, we go through a process of, you know, is this something that Totally wish to participate in? We submitted a contract, a tender yesterday. What's slowed down is the decision-making process, so it's not coming through as quickly as it could. When will that resume? I honestly don't know, and this was one of the reasons for removing guidance. It is very, very difficult out there. Some hospitals have money, and where they have money, they are prioritising patient care, and we are continuing to expand what we do for them. Other hospitals haven't, and it comes down, I mean, geographically, it is very, very difficult. We seeing a little bit of, you know, a north-south split with issues that they're doing, but I can assure you that where those opportunities are, we are working with commissioners. That is why guidance has been removed, because we seriously do not know. Another question, Wendy, you previously said you couldn't understand why the share price was so low and considered it undervalued in the company. Do you still think that? And if so, will you and your colleagues be buying shares? I mean, yeah, I still think we're undervalued. I think I've answered the questions about shares. It's a very personal thing. So if directors do, then we will obviously notify that. And I've also explained that we have all contributed to cost cutting. How many contracts did you tender for in the last year? Did you tender for the NHS GP appointment contract in the South West with Anima Health Research? I can't answer those questions. There is certain inside information that I can and I cannot tell you. What I can assure you of is that where opportunities exist and we believe it would add to our portfolio and enable us to grow, we do, we do go for those contracts, and we will continue to do that. The share price is taking a hammering. Do you, as a board, believe this has been overdone? I haven't got all of the board here today, and there are 3 of us. Yes, we do believe that the share price hammering has been overdone, and hopefully, excuse me, hopefully the presentation today will explain some of the things about that. What we often find, excuse me, let me just have a drink of water.
We've got quite a lot of questions coming in as well. I'm just going to have a quick flick down to see if we've got any common themes.
Yeah, what we often find is when we put results out, there is an initial reaction, then a few days later, it kind of balances out. So we'll look at that. But as I say, the share price is not something that we can control. What we can control is the messaging. The share price is down to what investors do. We work very closely with our advisors. We will be taking feedback very, very seriously. And, you know, like everyone else, we hope that the share price will eventually, you know, sort itself out. So why keep waiting on the NHS? Why not offer private healthcare direct to the public? It's a good question. I think it's something that the board will review again. One of the difficulties with the private healthcare, we don't own premises. We don't have our own hospitals where we can get people. We are limited to how we could do that. It's not completely off the agenda, and it is something we could do. There are lots of people doing that as well. So again, we would face different competitors. We've always positioned ourselves as a partner of high quality healthcare to help the NHS with managing that demand when capacity isn't there to do it. It is something that the board has looked at before, and it will be something that the board would look at again, but it would mean that we would need to position ourselves differently. So never say never, but it's not something that is about to happen. Can the company survive the current crisis? Yes, absolutely. And, you know, cash, I've tried to give you the reassurances on cash. Cash is being proactively managed. We do not have plans to come out to the market to raise cash simply to keep us going. We have a plan B and we have a plan C for what we do on cost cutting if this does run and run and run. But just to go back to what Lisa said, we have secured new business during the period. We have grown. We just haven't been able to do that at the pace that we thought we were going to be able to in the previous period when forecasts were put out. That's the reason why forecasts have been withdrawn. But, you know, patients will always remain the priority of the NHS, and we believe that this will rectify itself soon. Politically, we know that the NHS will be brought back onto the political agenda. What were the reasons given by the customer for the cancellation of the big London contracts? Did they include criticism of Totally? I think, like all providers coming out of the pandemic, performance did suffer a little bit. Our performance suffered, but we rectified that quickly, and we were trying to work in partnership with that particular commissioner. It was a difficult relationship towards the end, but can I be clear with you that we exited the contracts with that commissioner? It was getting to the stage where we couldn't continue at the costs and the demand within the contract that we'd got. So we cancelled them. It was a very, very difficult decision. And the vast majority of those urgent treatment centres were taken back into NHS management. So did they include criticism of Totally? Yes, and I am sure you all know that because they are public board minutes, that back in the summer of 2022, performance did dip. But again, if we were to compare ourselves with others, we were better than most of our competitors. That doesn't make it right. Yes, we did all struggle and we did rectify that, but it didn't work out with that commissioner. Differently to the rest of our competitors, we obviously have to report this because we're a publicly listed company, but contracts are handed back. Contracts do end every day for everybody working in healthcare, so we were not alone in that. Not sure what else I can say about it because it does feel quite a long time ago now. What percentage of revenue was contributed to the overall business in 2023 by Pioneer? Haven't got that in front of me, and just to remind you, Pioneer is now part of our elective division, and that isn't how we actually work on that sector. I'll talk to Lisa afterwards and just see how we can answer that one for you, but it isn't a question that I've got the answer to. If I look back during the period, I can tell you that urgent care is around 70% of our overall business, and elective care, of which Pioneer is part of it, is 30%. It hasn't grown as quickly as we would have expected.
Pioneer was 25%
there you
last
go.
year.
Pioneer was 25% last year. But Pioneer is ready to grow as well within our elective division. As I say, we don't refer to it just as Pioneer now. The next question I've got is what turnover of Pioneer? I think I've already answered that one. I won't go over it again. Thank you for your honesty. I will be in KSA soon, so will increase my position if other directors and Simon continue to do so. Thank you very much. Lisa spoke of now being, she's gone,
Oh,
she's
sorry,
scrolled down, I can't
sorry.
read the question, bear with me a minute, she's ahead of the game. Lisa spoke of now being able to calculate a weighted average cost of capital. Can you say anything about whether this is likely to be higher or lower? When the auditors have assumed calculating
for the goodwill, yeah, it's a technical question. I know why you're asking it. It's when I joined, we were talking about 12%, and then we went to 10%. When we actually had drawn some funds down on the RCF, we had a real number we could work with, because prior to that, obviously, it was purely cost of equity. So we now have a cost of debt, and that 6.4 is more accurate, and I wouldn't expect the auditors to, they audited that last year, whereas actually it was more difficult to audit before because you're trying to do all sorts of calculations on what the actual cost of equity is, and you've seen our share price and how our market capitalisation has changed. So it was much easier to calculate the cost of debt when you've got an actual RCF in place and you've drawn on it. So it was a simpler exercise for the auditors, and we are not renegotiating that RCF for the next 12 months, so I don't expect any change.
Thank you, Lisa. Would you consider selling a share of Totally given the lower share price if approached? If we were approached by anybody to either buy in or take over, we would have to announce that to the market. What I can tell you is we're not in any of those negotiations at the moment, but you have to consider everything under AIM regulation. So I guess the answer is yes, because you have to consider everything. Regards the dividend, is it your intention to resume this at the earliest possibility? Yeah, it was a very, very difficult decision not to pay the dividend, but I'm sure you would agree with me that there are other priorities that we need to make sure within the organisation. But the board do discuss this at every meeting, so please take that as assurance. If the NHS is so desperate for help to reduce ever-expanding waiting lists, why are they still not using a company like Totally? What are they expecting to happen with the NHS? It purely comes down to what funds they've got and what their priorities are. Each NHS trust is in a different position, and when it comes to waiting list management, we tend to have conversations with individual hospitals. Please don't take away from this that no hospitals are working on reducing waiting lists. They are, and we are working with numerous hospitals every weekend to do that. And we are still having conversations about expanding that along different specialties and different areas. However, each NHS trust has responsibility for balancing budgets at the end of the year, so they're having to make some very difficult decisions. What we are doing is having those discussions about if and when and maybe, but we are continuing to work with those hospitals. We have grown during the period, and we will ensure that we're ready as soon as hospitals contact us, but they are accountable for managing their own budgets. Would you consider volunteer help from investors?
Depends
Yes.
what they're doing.
Yeah, it depends what the volunteer help is, but yes. Everyone's got my email, and I know you've all got my email because I get regular emails, so the simple answer is yes. We have no questions left. We will, if any more come in, we will try and answer those. But once again, can I thank you for taking the time today? I do hope that the presentation from myself and my colleagues has been useful. I hope you take the reassurances that we've provided to you today. We will reinstate guidance as soon as we find that as possible. At the moment, it is not right for us to try and put forecasts out there when there are so many uncertainties. But as Totally is poised today, we have managed everything that's within our gift to manage. We will continue to do so. We do not plan on coming out of cash. Cash is well managed, and we do see many opportunities out there. So thank you for your ongoing support, and we have tried today to answer all of those questions as honestly as we possibly can. Thank you.
Wendy, Lisa, thank you. And I think you've addressed all those questions you can from investors. And of course, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. Before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, Wendy, could I please just ask you for a few closing comments?
Yes, thank you very much. If you have got more questions, please submit them. We'll try and answer them. Totally remain absolutely committed not only to the care that it provides, but also to our investors. We thank you. I think I've done my closing comments. I don't think there's any point in going over them all again, but thank you very much for your time. And again, contact us if there are any more questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy, Lisa, John, thank you for updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Totally PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. Good morning to you all.